unit through the context of Planaria. So the very first thing we did was we cut our Planaria in half. And luckily you had some faith, hopefully, that I wasn't asking you to murder these little flatworms. And so I'm going to attempt to draw a little Planaria guy for us here. Boop. Had some eyeballs. They're not really eyeballs, they're eye spots, but good enough. So we had one half there, and then maybe over here we had the tail. Yeah, it's about as good as that's going to get. So the very first thing we noticed was that they didn't die. You chopped them in half, but they didn't die. So in other words, they were able to heal themselves. And that's when we started to look at this idea of mitosis. And one of the purposes of mitosis is healing. And it's the same in humans as well. Like if you cut your finger, you get a paper cut, your skin is going to heal over itself because you're able to make more skin cells through mitosis. So healing is one of the first major uses of mitosis or purposes of it. But then we kept watching and we started noticing that, okay, these planaria, they are still alive. They're still alive after a couple of days. So we could consider that the second purpose of mitosis, which is to maintain. The number of cells and their living and things like that. And that's true in humans as well. We maintain our bodies through mitosis because your cells get old and they die off, and then you have to replace those. So that maintenance, replacing, maintaining, that's another purpose of mitosis. Then we started looking at them and we realized, hey, wait a second. They are starting to literally grow bigger and grow their body parts back. So we had something that looks a little bit kind of like this. So pretend like here, this one's growing its tail back. Boop, 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 boop. So growing its tail back, right? So pretend that it's a dotted tail. Okay, there we go. And this one, it's growing its head back. Boop, 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 boop. Let's draw it in. Boop. There's the eye. I don't have my mouse on me, so this is really bad. Okay. All right. So they started to regrow their body parts. So this was the original. This was the original. And that is getting at this next aspect of mitosis, of purpose of mitosis, which is growth. They were able to get physically bigger and regrow their parts, but it's more than just getting bigger. Like in humans, that's what we use it for. Like you have a growth spurt, things like that. That's going to be mitosis. But with these planaria, it was something a little bit more than that. It was technically regeneration. Put my phone on silent. There we go. So it's technically this idea of regeneration. And with regeneration, we saw that they were able to regrow entire parts of their body. So how did that happen? Well, now we're getting into this idea of stem cells. So stem cells are cells that are undifferentiated. They allow you to turn into any other type of cell. They're cells that can turn into any other type of cell through the process of differentiation. So within stem cells, cell differentiation is how they become specialized cells. But why can't we do that? We have stem cells. Why can't we just regrow our limbs? Well, it comes down to this other idea of stem cells that we were looking at, which is potency. So in other words, planaria have way more potent stem cells than we do. And we looked at the different types. We had totipotent stem cells. That's really only present in humans, at least when we are a zygote, when we're a single cell. We got pluripotent, which as well for humans, not really present past the embryo stage, but for planaria, they have pluripotent stem cells, which is why they're able to do this. They have stem cells that are able to turn into any other type of cell in their body. Let me just type out all the potencies here. So for example, in a planaria, down here in the tail, if it's trying to regrow its head, well, it has to have stem cells down in the tail that are capable of turning into all the body parts that we would need to regrow in the head. So skin, the eye spots, so those like retina stem cells, they would need to regrow their nerve cells because they have ganglia inside their head. They've got the nerve net continues all the way up here, the nerve cords. They've got their gastrovascular cavity goes into their heads. So they would need to be able to regrow all of those different body parts in order to regrow their head, which we know that they can because we literally saw it in our petri dishes. So that is proof that they have pluripotent stem cells. And then some of us in our petri dishes saw this. We had our planaria, we chopped it in half, and now we have 2 free-floating planaria like swimming around. So that means that what we saw was asexual reproduction because we have 2 fully formed organisms where we used to have 1. So we had asexual reproduction. The benefits of this, well, it's fast. You can do it when you're alone. So no need for a partner. It's great for if you're like in stress, like these planaria can actually do it themselves. They pinch off in the middle, and they actually kind of essentially chop themselves in half by pinching their bodies in half in the middle and then creating new ones. So those are some of the main benefits there of asexual reproduction. But sexual reproduction is also capable by planaria, and we saw that with our like flow chart of their overall life cycles. And we also saw evidence of that, at least some of you did, in your petri dishes, because some of you saw floating around a 3rd planaria. How could that have happened? How could you have 2 planaria now all of a sudden have a 3rd? If it was asexual reproduction, again, if like each of these created a copy, you would expect to see like 4 or something like that. We have 3. What that's evidence of is sexual reproduction. So that's another aspect of this unit to keep in mind, which is why we're revisiting this idea of meiosis, because what is required for sexual reproduction? You need to have meiosis to create those gametes, the sperm and the egg that are haploid, and then you need those 2 to come together through fertilization, where you have your sperm and your egg combine. Planaria, interestingly enough, if we look at their anatomy, which you did on one of your worksheets, they have both ovaries and testes, so they're hermaphroditic. We also saw evidence of them being hermaphroditic when we were looking at their karyotypes. So karyotypes are something we learned in a previous unit, so why are they circling back here? Well, 2 reasons. We learned 2 really important things about planaria by revisiting their karyotypes or looking at their karyotypes. One of the first things we realized is that they have no sex chromosomes. So what does that tell us? That they have both sex organs, actually. Both sex organs. So they have your ovaries, they've got their testes. And what that tells us is that they can reproduce sexually with any other planaria that they find, which is really cool. We also saw that some planaria, some are not haploid, not diploid, but just when they're a normal, fully functioning planaria, triploid. In other words, they have 3 of each type of chromosome. And if that's the case, it's not going to be easy for them to do meiosis, right? Non-disjunction is guaranteed to occur if you have 3 of every type of chromosome because you don't have pairs that can equally and evenly split up. So you're more likely to have offspring then that have an off number of chromosome. So this was our proof, again, more proof, not just like what we were seeing in our petri dishes, but from the karyotype evidence that they can do asexual reproduction. So that's why we were revisiting our karyotypes. All right. So if we look at our learning targets, our learning targets are as follows. We've got, I can support a claim with evidence for the reasons multicellular organisms need to perform mitosis for survival. We've talked about all those 4 main reasons. We had growth, we had repair, healing, maintenance or replacement, and then asexual reproduction. Our next learning target is I can model the chromosome movements in meiosis and mitosis to defend a claim that meiosis leads to variation while mitosis leads to identical copies. So you do need to know those processes. And most importantly, this big takeaway, it's kind of included in the learning target that meiosis leads to variation. That's the benefit of it. Because if we look at all of the pros of asexual reproduction, there's a lot of benefits to doing asexual reproduction. So why wouldn't all organisms, like especially like planaria, if they have the choice, why wouldn't they always do asexual? It points to the fact that sexual reproduction because really the only benefit of sexual reproduction is genetic variety, that shows us that that aspect, that genetic variety must be so important that sexual reproduction can be preferred in certain cases to override all of those benefits of asexual reproduction. And it comes down to this idea of meiosis. Meiosis is what allows sexual reproduction to have that variation, as well as the randomness of fertilization, because you've got it coming from two different individuals. But meiosis definitely helps. I can analyze karyotypes to understand how reproduction would occur for a given population. In other words, if they're triploid, what are they probably going to do? If they're diploid, what are they probably going to do specific to the planaria? I can make and defend a claim based on evidence that when there is a choice in reproduction modes, organisms will use the one that best benefits their long-term survival. So this is that asexual versus sexual reproduction. When are you going to do it? One or the other. And a lot of it's going to come down to their circumstances, right? Are they alone? Can they not even find another organism? Asexual. Are they in environments that are changing constantly? And for the benefit of the whole species, sexual reproduction would be preferred because it's giving you that genetic variety. So thinking about those aspects of it. And then the last one is I can use evidence of potency to determine the differentiation capabilities of stem cells through gene expression. So if you have knowing that the planaria must have pluripotent stem cells, at least because they can turn into all of those different types of stem cell families that we were looking at, that kind of idea. And that's the unit. So it's all been about trying to explain the planaria mystery here. But hopefully you've picked up on some nuggets that pertain to humans along the way as well.